I wanted to evaluate my options and my boyfriend left me. It's not infidelity, it's gaining perspective. I asked my boyfriend for a month to evaluate my options. I thought he would be mature and accept it, but he got rid of me and refused to take responsibility for my debt. I've always believed that women mature faster than men. That idea has been with me my whole life, and I don't say it out of arrogance, but because I have often felt that I think further ahead, that I analyze the future and decisions with a broader vision. But not everyone understands that. People tend to judge intentions without trying to understand the underlying reasons. And that's exactly what happened to me. I had been living with Matteo for several months. Everything was going relatively well. There was affection, routine, a certain stability. But as time went on, I started to have doubts not about whether I loved him or not, but about whether I should really close off all my options so young. I didn't want to feel like I had settled for the first one just out of habit. I thought about what my life would be in the long term, and wondered if I was truly choosing with my head or with my heart. I know I owed Matteo fidelity, I know that. But I also felt that life isn't just about following rules, but about experimenting, about knowing for certain before truly committing. And in my head, that sounded reasonable. I believed that he, being a mature man, would also understand. After all, I thought we both wanted the same thing, to find the best option for the future. I never imagined he would judge me so harshly. A month and a half ago, I made the decision to talk to him about it. If we were a couple, the right thing to do was to be transparent. I wanted to explain what I was planning to do and hear his opinion. Of course, it wasn't that I was going to ask for his permission because my decision was already made, but I at least had to tell him. I considered that fair. I waited for a quiet moment. One evening, as we were finishing dinner, I spoke to him calmly. I told him I had been reflecting on our future, that I didn't want to act on impulse or make mistakes we would later regret. I wanted to take some distance to think clearly. Matteo looked at me, not quite understanding, so I was direct. I've decided to live with Patricio for a month, I said. I need to know which relationship is better for me. He dropped his silverware with a thud. He looked at me with a mixture of disbelief and contained rage. I tried to soften it with what, to me, was the most logical explanation in the world. That way, I'll know which relationship suits me. I don't want to make mistakes on impulse. I said those words with conviction, as if they were something mature and reasonable. But I only had to look at him to see that he wasn't processing them as I expected. His face darkened, his lips tightened, and he could barely breathe. Matteo always had a strong character. Not violent, but the type to explode quickly. He gets angry in a flash, raises his voice, and then calms down a short while later. That's why I wasn't scared. I thought he just needed time to think. I asked him to understand that it wasn't about infidelity but about gaining perspective. I told him it was for the best for both of us, that if I didn't try living with someone else, I would never know for sure who to choose. But my words only seemed to add more fuel to the fire. "Are you listening to yourself?" he shouted. "You're telling me you're going to go off with another man to see if he suits you better." "Don't look at it that way," I replied. "It's not a competition, it's a reflection." "Reflection? What you're doing is making a fool of me," he said, slamming his hand on the table. I tried to stay calm. There was no point in arguing if he was so agitated. I explained that it wasn't a breakup, that I wasn't ending things with him but seeking clarity. But he was no longer listening. He said it was all over, that he wouldn't stay with me another day, that I had treated him like an idiot. He yelled at me to pack my bags and get out. Even so, I tried to reason with him. I reminded him that we were living together, that we had shared things, that he shouldn't make rash decisions, but he didn't want to hear any of it. "Out of my house," he repeated. "Out." I took a deep breath and decided not to insist. I knew that when he calmed down, he would understand that it was for the best. He has always been like that. He gets angry, says harsh things, but then he reconsiders. So I didn't want to keep feeding the fight. I simply told him, "Give me this month. Don't shut me out. I want to do things right. When I'm clear on who I choose, we'll talk about it calmly." He looked at me without responding. It was like talking to a brick wall. In that moment, I understood that the best thing was to leave before everything ended worse. Before leaving, I remembered something important. I had a loan that was taken out in my name, but that Matteo helped me pay. I work, but my income is much lower than his. He earns almost triple what I do. It's not that I was completely dependent on him, but his support made a difference. So I asked him to continue helping me during this month. I explained that, after all, I was doing it for us to decide with maturity, and that I didn't want to struggle financially during the process. He didn't respond with words, he just yelled at me, "Get out of here," and slammed the door shut. It wasn't easy, I admit. But convinced that it was for the best, I went to Patricio's. He already knew about my plan. I had told him that I needed to know what it was like to live with him to understand if we could have a future. Patricio wasn't surprised or questioning. He simply told me it was no problem, that I could stay as long as I needed. That gave me peace of mind, although I must admit that his relaxed demeanor didn't entirely appeal to me. He was too calm, too indifferent. The complete opposite of Mateo, who could be intense but present. The first day in the new apartment was strange. It wasn't that I felt bad, but something in the atmosphere felt uncomfortable. Patricio wasn't thoughtful or attentive. He spent most of his time working or distracted by his phone. We didn't talk much, but I convinced myself that I had to resist the urge to compare him to Mateo. After all, this month was about that. Observing, analyzing, understanding who I felt more comfortable with. The first few days were quiet. I focused on adapting. I posted some photos, shared quotes about personal growth, about how important it is to know yourself before choosing a partner. People saw it as something inspiring, although I knew that deep down Mateo was surely interpreting them as digs at him. It didn't matter. He would calm down, I knew him. However, as the days went by, I noticed a void. Mateo didn't text me, didn't react to anything, didn't ask about me. I didn't want to reach out to him directly so as not to seem desperate, but his indifference unsettled me. I sent him a short, neutral message just to test the waters. "I hope you're doing well." He never replied. I didn't take it as a rejection. I thought he still needed to process it. In my head, everything was still under control. Meanwhile, living with Patricio was weird. He had his good points but also a very superficial side. We didn't talk about the future or goals or anything serious. Sometimes he would leave without notice, other times he would be quiet all day. One day when I tried to talk to him about how I was feeling, he simply said, "Relax, don't think so much. If we're good, we're good." That response left me cold. If we're good. That was it. For the first time I began to doubt my decision. Maybe I wasn't being as mature as I thought, but I had already taken the step, so I forced myself to continue. I kept telling myself that at the end of the month, I would know for sure who to choose, that I shouldn't have regrets before the time was up. One night, while we were having dinner, Patricio asked me casually, "So, what are you going to do when your experiment is over?" His tone was mocking. I told him I would decide when the time came. He smiled. "Just make sure you choose well," he said. "Sometimes when you compare, you realize you don't fit in on either side." I didn't understand if he was talking about me or himself, but that phrase stuck with me. That same week, I tried to visit Mateo. I didn't want an argument, just to talk, to explain that I was doing it for the good of both of us. I went to the building, but the doorman told me he didn't live there anymore. I was in shock. I asked him if he knew where he had moved, but he had no idea. I went home confused. I couldn't understand how he could have left without saying anything. I texted him again, but he didn't even appear online anymore. For the first time, I felt scared. Not of losing him romantically, but of losing control of the situation. In my head, the plan had always been simple. Take a month, reflect, compare, and get back with the one I really wanted to be with. But now it seemed that Mateo had closed that door without even waiting for the deadline. I tried to convince myself that he was acting impulsively, that when he calmed down, everything would go back to normal. I couldn't imagine this was final. After all, I had always considered him a reasonable man. The days passed and the silence became unbearable. I was still with Patricio, but I felt more and more disconnected from everything. He continued with his exasperating calmness, as if I didn't exist. I tried to make it work, to not think so much, to focus on what I was supposed to learn from this experience, but inside me, a discomfort was growing that I couldn't ignore. I told myself daily that I had to be strong for these 30 days, that this month was for learning and reflection, that in the end, everything would make sense. But even though I didn't want to admit it, I began to understand that maybe this month of maturity was going to cost me much more than I had imagined. The time I spent with Patricio made me understand many things. At first, I kept telling myself I had to be strong, that it was a month of reflection, of personal growth, of maturity. But with each passing day, every silence, every indifferent gesture from him, made me realize something I never thought I'd admit. My future was not with him. In reality, my future was with Mateo. Patricio was calm, too calm. He didn't argue, he didn't commit, he didn't have an opinion. He could go a whole weekend without asking me how I was, without being interested in anything beyond his phone and his TV series. That calmness, which at first seemed like a virtue, ended up feeling like an emptiness, and in that emptiness I understood how much I had lost. Mateo could be impulsive. Yes, he got angry quickly, spoke loudly, but he was also someone who was present, who cared, who took action. He made me feel accompanied. Patricio, on the other hand, made me feel invisible. I couldn't keep deceiving myself, so I decided it was time to end this experiment. I had learned enough, and now I just wanted to fix things with the one who really mattered. I had already found out where Mateo was living. A mutual friend had told me he had moved to another apartment, not far from the previous one. So without a second thought, I started to pack my things. One morning, I thanked Patricio for everything. I told him it had been a valuable experience, that it helped me understand many things, but that I had made a decision. I've chosen Mateo, I said calmly. He's the man I want to be with. I hope things between us are clear and don't get complicated. Patricio just shrugged and said, "Don't worry, no problem." I don't know if his indifference hurt me or if I was embarrassed to realize how little I mattered to him, but I didn't dwell on it. I packed my bags and went to Mateo's new apartment. When he opened the door and saw me, the first thing he tried to do was close it, but I put my foot in the frame and didn't let him. "Don't do this," I said. "I just need you to listen to me for a moment." Mateo looked at me coldly, without saying a word. He had the same expression as that night I left, only now there was no anger, just distance. I took a breath and spoke. "I've made my decision. I choose you. You are the perfect man for me. And now we can continue our relationship." I thought it would sound convincing, that he would feel something upon hearing me, but his face remained the same, hard, dry, completely alien. Then he answered me in a firm voice. "And have you ever wondered if I want to continue with you?" That question threw me off. I wasn't expecting it. In my head, it was all a matter of waiting for him to calm down, of giving him time. I never considered the possibility that he might not want to continue. "But you love me," I said. "I would understand if you wanted to do this kind of test. We all need to be sure." Mateo smiled, but not with tenderness, with irony. "Then let me be clear," he said. "I don't want to hear from you again." That sentence hit me hard. I was quiet for a few seconds. I understood it, in part. A relationship is a two-way street, and if he didn't want to continue, I couldn't force him. But I couldn't leave with everything so broken, without at least resolving the practical things. Before leaving, I said in a softer voice, "At least help me with the loan. You know my situation. I thought my other messages would get to you. But I'm close to the deadline and I don't want to have problems." Mateo didn't even blink, just replied, "You can figure that out on your own." I felt a knot in my chest. It wasn't fair. "You promised to help me," I said. "You swore you would, and now you're playing dumb. You have no word. A man without honor is worthless." He sighed wearily and replied, "Think of it that way if you want, but I only helped you because you were my partner and you're not anymore." "You're a miserable bastard," I yelled. He looked at me one more second without a trace of emotion and said, "Now leave, you're wasting my time." That was the last thing I heard before he slammed the door in my face. I didn't know whether to cry or scream. I felt humiliated. I had gone with my heart in my hand, ready to fix things, and he treated me like I was a stranger. I had no choice but to go back to Patricio's house. When I arrived, he was sitting there watching television as always. I told him everything that had happened in detail, my voice still trembling. I expected at least a gesture of support, but his response was as flat as his gaze. "Well, I figured," he said. "Not everyone is like me, who takes things calmly." "Don't talk like that," I replied, annoyed. "I'm in a bad place, Patricio. I don't need sarcasm. I'm just telling it like it is," he retorted without taking his eyes off the screen. "So what are you going to do now?" I didn't know what to say. I barely stammered. I have nowhere to go. I thought I could stay here a little longer. Patricio lowered the volume on the TV, glanced at me and blurted out, "Hey, don't get too comfortable. You have 2 weeks max to figure out where you're going." I was speechless. "What do you mean 2 weeks?" I asked. "Yeah," he replied with complete nonchalance. "My girlfriend is coming from abroad and I want to get the house ready for her return." I looked at him, not understanding. "Your girlfriend? I didn't know you had a girlfriend." "Well, you know how it is," he said, smiling. "She's the girl of the moment. We'll see how things go." That sentence hit me like a ton of bricks. "So what was this?" I asked. "What we had was fun," he replied without hesitation. "But I'm not looking for anything serious." I was paralyzed. "Just fun," I repeated in disbelief. "But I came to live with you for a reason, because I thought there was something real between us." He stood up, put a hand on my shoulder, and in an almost paternal tone said, "Don't get your hopes up, because if you do, it's best you leave. Don't confuse things." That mix of condescension and contempt broke me inside. I felt used, discarded, as if everything I had done had no value. I had risked my relationship, my stability, my reputation, and he just saw me as someone passing through. I tried to stay calm, but my blood was boiling inside. I didn't know if I wanted to cry or break something. I locked myself in the room and sat on the bed looking at my suitcases. What was I going to do now? The loan was due. I didn't have the money to cover it, and I no longer had anyone to ask for help. Mateo wanted nothing to do with me, and Patricio had made it clear that I had an expiration date. I felt trapped. Over the next few days, I tried to think of solutions. I looked for options to move. I talked to a coworker about maybe renting a cheap room. I even considered moving back in with my parents, although the idea turned my stomach. We didn't end on good terms. When I left with Mateo, we had a huge fight. My mother told me I was making a mistake, that things were moving too fast, that I should focus on growing first, not on living with someone. And of course, when everything happened with Patricio, I didn't even dare to tell them anything. Now, the mere idea of returning to that house with my head hung low was unbearable, but it seemed to be the only option. I had no savings, my salary barely covered my minimum expenses, and the loan was hanging over me like a dark cloud. I kept repeating to myself, "I just wanted to be sure." And that phrase, which once sounded so reasonable, now seemed like a ridiculous excuse. How could I have been so stupid? Not everyone has the same maturity to process it like a woman. Still, I couldn't accept that all was lost. I thought that if I could get stable, if I managed to pay off the loan and get my life in order, maybe I could seek out Mateo again later when things had cooled down. Maybe there would still be a chance to talk calmly, to explain that it was all an error in judgment, a way too advanced method of seeking clarity. But the truth was I had no partner, no support, no money, just my suitcases and a looming deadline. Patricio, meanwhile, acted as if nothing had happened. In fact, he seemed to enjoy my discomfort. Every now and then he would drop comments like, "Enjoy these days because time flies." Or, "I don't want any drama when you leave, okay?" It was humiliating, and the worst part was that I couldn't do anything about it. I felt betrayed by my own decisions. The 30 days I thought would bring me clarity only left me in darkness. And now, with the loan payment due, with no place to live, and with no one to lend me a hand, for the first time I understood what it meant to lose everything. Update 1. Okay, I understand the people who have said all sorts of things to me in the comments, but don't be troglodytes either. Most of you are just spewing hate without even trying to understand my position. Yes, I made mistakes, I don't deny it. But it's one thing to be wrong and another thing entirely to be crucified as if I had committed a crime. My mistake was thinking Mateo had the necessary level of maturity to understand me. I thought he could analyze things calmly, see beyond the emotional side. And it was also a mistake to assume that Patricio saw our relationship the same way I did, as something serious, something that could lead to more. But well, you can see how all that turned out. And yes, I'll grant a little bit of a point to those who accuse me of being unfaithful, not because I did anything behind his back with the intention of betraying him, but because I didn't tell Mateo directly what was happening with Patricio before I left. A lack of communication, I admit it, but I truly took for granted that he would understand. I thought that at this stage it wasn't necessary to spell it out. That was another mistake of mine. Many of you asked in the comments how I met Patricio. As I mentioned in my original post, he is my coworker. Things with him developed in a curious way. One day, another colleague told me that Patricio was in love with me, and I, being a direct woman who isn't afraid, went and asked him to his face. He said yes, that he liked me, and from there we started going out. I never thought he just saw me as fun. He always gave me the impression that he wanted something more. He talked to me about the future, about independence, about sharing goals. But well, it's clear to me now that all of that was just smoke and mirrors. At work, the situation became a living hell. After everything that happened, our colleagues noticed something had occurred between us. But no one said anything directly. The worst part is that everyone knows what Patricio is like. He a suck-up, the boss's favorite, the guy who scores points by making others look bad. And of course, after how we ended things, he made sure to make my life impossible. Something I didn't mention before was how I left his house. It wasn't peaceful, not by a long shot. I screamed everything at him. I completely lost it. At that moment, I was filled with rage and frustration. I didn't hold back. I said things I'm now embarrassed to repeat. But it was too late. He just looked at me with that smug face that people who feel they've won get. From then on, at the office, he started pulling strings, small subtle things. If I arrived 2 minutes late, a written warning. If I asked for permission to take a longer lunch, another warning. If I breathed too loudly, another one. Until one day, I was called into HR and told that with my accumulated warnings, my contract was terminated. Just like that. No right to defend myself, no opportunity to explain. All because of that imbecile. And well, what's my current situation? To my shame, I'm living with my parents. Yes, the same ones I fought with when I went to live with Mateo. It wasn't a big, happy family reunion, by the way. The truth is, I got in through the window, literally. When they found me the next morning, they nearly had a heart attack. I told them I wasn't leaving, that I had problems, that I needed help. At first, they yelled at me, said all sorts of things, that I had been irresponsible, that now I thought I was so mature, that this was the result of my stupid decisions. They tried to kick me out, but I went into full repentant child mode. I cried, I begged for forgiveness, I promised I would change, and well, with sour faces they allowed me to stay. But with 1,000 conditions. They're practically treating me like I'm 15 again. As for the loan, honestly, I don't care anymore. The bank calls me every day to collect, but I don't answer. I turn off my phone or put it on silent. I already know my credit is ruined. That I'm on the blacklist. That I won't be able to get another loan for years. But at this moment, what does it matter? I don't have a job, I have no income, and frankly, I'm not that worried. I'll sort it out later when things calm down. In the meantime, I'm still here, enduring looks of reproach, sarcastic comments, and calls from strangers who think they can scare me with legal threats. They can't do anything to me beyond continuing to call and reminding me every second that I messed up. So yes, for those who are asking, I'll get through this. Don't worry about me, really don't. Sarcasm, in case you couldn't tell.